Welcome to the Atlas for Wellness podcast. I'm Dr. Chad McIntyre of the Triad Upper Cervical Clinic in Kernersville, North Carolina. And if you have even a passing interest in getting well and staying well, I hope this will become a good resource for you. We're going to discuss a variety of topics, not limited to just the typical how to be healthy list, while also taking on issues going on in healthcare that don't serve our health goals despite their mainstream status in the clinical hierarchy. Our opening topic in Atlas for Wellness podcast history deals with perhaps the most underrated aspect of obtaining and sustaining your health: your ability to manage stress. You would not believe the number of times in my office when I sit down with patients and ask them about where they're at in their lives, and they tell me about events that have occurred that are emotionally trying, to say the least. And I ask them, so what are you doing to deal with the stress of that situation? How are you processing that? What's your go-to tool to actually deal with the emotional turmoil going on in your life right now? And the most common response that I get is, I don't really have one. Well, the problem with that is that stress is called the number one cause of disease for a reason, and it's due to the fact that stress is like a vice grip on the body, both physically and emotionally. So you can know full well that all other aspects of your health are right where they need to be, that your central nervous system is firing on all cylinders, maximizing your inborn capability to be as resilient as possible. You can know that your structural foundation is level and balanced so your body can physically sustain itself. You can know that you put constructive food into your body that allows it to build new cells with productive materials. You can know that you flush out your system regularly with water so your body can detoxify. You can have all the basics covered. And if you don't deal well with stress, your health is still going to suffer. We discuss in my office quite frequently what we refer to as the 5 broad-based categories of what it takes to be healthy: function, balance, nutrition, exercise, and attitude. And when we have these discussions, it is designed to reinforce a common theme, which is that most issues with health arise when you are deficient in one of those 5 different categories. Abnormal reigns supreme in stressful environments. No matter how sound you are in the other 4 areas, if you don't manage stress well, it's going to be difficult for you to stay healthy. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it. That is something that I have in my email signature to reinforce every single time that I digitally communicate with somebody with that platform, that attitude is important, that what we think about, we bring about. The manner in which you react to stress is governed by your attitude. We all have stressors, but it's how we deal with them that matters. If we react poorly, we're going to have a much greater tendency to be sick, to have disease, to not be healthy. The opposite is true as well. The better attitude we have, then the easier it is to maintain and sustain a healthy lifestyle, to ward off sickness and disease. So today's topic is stress management. Why is it so important, and how do you do it effectively? Because one of the most frustrating things about healthcare is when we are told that we need to do this blanket thing. You need to do X, Y, Z, but then are never actually told how you're supposed to do it. For instance, everybody knows that we are supposed to eat well, that nutrition is one of the core elements of being healthy. Well, 30% of the American population actually does that, despite the fact that 100% of the American population knows that you're supposed to do that. To give you a little bit of background information about me, my undergraduate education was in psychology. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from North Carolina State University. So the psychology of the human mind, why people do what they do, has always been something that has fascinated me. And then, of course, I'm like anyone else. I've had a lot of various different stressors in my life. I was also at a point in my life once upon a time where I was very unhealthy. And there were a lot of signs and symptoms that had developed to put that on display. For about a decade, I tumbled down the rabbit hole. And upper cervical care, what I do in my office, is what helped me sort of lay the groundwork for me becoming the healthy person that I am today. But later on, when it started to become apparent that my ability to manage stress was fairly poor, that became an area that I had to focus on. And I heard the same things that all of you have, which is you need to learn to manage your stress better, etc. But no one ever taught me how. So I had to go and seek somebody who could teach me how. And fortunately, I ended up finding someone, or in this case, multiple people that helped me with that. So I'll get to some of the things that I've learned to help me manage stress in just a bit, but I want you to be very clear on something straight away, and that's that what works for me is not necessarily going to be right for you. We may be able to share some of the basic themes, but the specifics are really going to boil down to what's best for you individually. What I want to do today is just help accentuate why you should be exploring this, and then give you a few basic tools that you can use to deal with stress better, simply put. Right now, we live in a very negative thinking world, and we're facing a lot of major challenges. And that's in the broader sense. In our individual lives, we have our jobs, we have our personal relationships, our responsibility as spouses, significant others, parents, pet owners, homeowners, car owners, and on down the line. It's such a fast-paced world at that. The time we once had to stop and think has been replaced by a constant barrage of chatter, most of which isn't exactly painting the prettiest picture. Therefore, it's very easy to get into a pattern of destructive thoughts because such thoughts are so well reinforced by our social environment. The two most common causes of death in the United States are heart disease and cancer, both of which thrive inside the bodies of high-stress people. And when I say high stress, I mean people that not only are exposed to a lot of stressors, but people who don't know how to deal with them. There are three types of stress: physical, chemical, and emotional. And it's emotional stress that I reference in this discussion primarily, but destructive reactions to it that add physical or chemical stress to the equation are heavily involved here too. If emotional stress is the root cause of all disease, as they say, and the two most common causes of American deaths are intricately linked to stress and poor responses to it, it's a good idea for the general public to learn better stress management skills. It is clinically proven by the Mayo Clinic as well as a lot of different other outlets and resources that if you decrease your stress, then you decrease tremendously your risk for cardiovascular disease and live a lot longer. So the million-dollar question obviously is then, well, how do you do that? And the answer to that question really starts with having a good understanding of your own attitude and how you mentally process things. What you think about, truly you do then bring about. It's called the law of attraction for a reason, not the theory of attraction, not the hypothesis of attraction, but the law of attraction, as in it is indisputable that what you think about, you bring about. What goes in your head ends up affecting the rest of you. Your physical reactions to your emotional stressors, all of it's tied together. So I want you to ask yourself, if you have a bad day at the office, and let's say that you end up having another bad day at the office the following day, and another bad day at the office the following day, and then you get into an argument with your spouse, and then you have arguments with your kids, and then you get into it with your mother about how you haven't been to see her in a while. Does this patterning sound familiar? I ask you, what do you do to try to break that pattern? How long does it spiral before you put your foot down and just change it? Because you can. One bad day at the office doesn't have to spiral into 2, into 3, into then its tentacles reaching into your family life, both extended and your core unit. When you're feeling down, if you understand how attitude works, if you understand how your mental processing works, all you have to do is tweak it, and things can change, and you can stop that pattern dead in its tracks. It sounds really simple, but it really is that simple. And I've been there. I mean, I've been in situations in which it was tough to break that patterning, but all you have to do is take it a day at a time. Nobody likes to hear that because it's so cliche, but it's so true. One day at a time, 1 hour at a time, for that matter. We get so caught up in trying to see, as the old example goes, driving down the road in the middle of the night, what's beyond the 200 feet in front of us that our headlights show. Well, in real life, we can't, any more than we can we're driving in the night, see beyond those 200 feet. We can't see beyond the next few seconds, the next minute, the next hour, the next day. So just take it as it comes. And if you do have something of a bad day, then one of the things I would highly recommend is to be aware of that and make sure that when you get home, you're not immediately flipping on that TV to CNN so that you hear about all of the lousy things that happened in the rest of the world on that particular day that reinforces the negative pattern begun by your challenging day at the office. Don't do that. What good does that do? All of that it does is it gets you further into the muck. Grab hold of that situation and just break the pattern. Don't turn on the TV. Sometimes that's one of the easiest things you can do. Don't open up the newspaper on a day like that. Don't go surfing the web to usatoday.com and CNN and Fox News, etc. Don't get into that. Put yourself in a position where when you get home from a challenging day, you're breaking the pattern by simply surrounding yourself with things that are more constructive. Have a good conversation with your wife. You don't necessarily need to rehash the negative events of the day, but ask her how her day was. Ask your husband how his day was. Go talk to your kids and let their awesome, just absolutely rapturous lives just take hold of you for a few minutes. Give them a hug. Something simple like that can make a big difference. It helps break the pattern. And I know to some of you that sounds silly because most of us have grown up in a society where you just kind of power through. You put your head down and you keep on going. Well, if you understand that that's not necessarily the best way to go about things in terms of your overall health, and that there's no reason why you can't press on and keep going just with your head a little higher because your attitude's a little better, then that's certainly a positive thing that will have a good impact on your life. So instead of flipping on CNN or Fox News when you get home from a lousy day, why not instead put on an episode of Modern Family or your favorite comedy and spend that half hour while you're eating dinner or hanging out with your spouse or your kids laughing your tail off, because that will go a long way toward making sure that the next day is not a repeat of the previous day. And then you can avoid 2 negative days in a row or 3 negative days in a row, or the days that then spiral into your family life being disrupted. The leading researchers on the topic of attitude and health, one of the first conclusions that they ever drew was that optimists are problem solvers who try to improve their situations. So it's not a head in the clouds mentality when something quote unquote bad happens and your reaction to it should just be to, stick your head up in the sun and just feel like everything is great all the time and nothing is bad and the world is perfect. That's not what I'm talking about. By no means is that what I'm talking about. But in addition to trying to break negative thought patterns by just simply surrounding yourself with more constructive things instead of destructive things, like staying away from the media and watching a comedy, you can also apply that to the way that you look at the negative things that happen, the perceived negative things that happen. When I'm in the office and I deal with a challenging patient, when I first started out, it would be very difficult for me not to get into kind of a situation where I'm in fight or flight mode, where my heart rate speeds up and I'm thinking, okay, well, that stunk. I hope I don't have to be in that kind of situation again. I eventually found it much more constructive to look at it like, okay, well, yeah, that was challenging. What can I learn from that, though? Because I'm probably going to encounter some sort of similar scenario again, so the next time that I encounter a patient like that or a situation like that, how am I going to deal with it that time? And then when I do that, the nice thing about that is, having been in that pattern for several years now, is when stuff like that happens now, it doesn't have the wide-ranging effect on me emotionally that it used to. I can just go home and leave the office at the office and be around my wife and now my kids, and that's that. And then the next day is a new day. So that quote about optimists being problem solvers that try to improve their situations, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. Napoleon Hill, who is one of the foremost authors on success, he has passed away now, but he was contracted basically about 100 years ago by some of the most successful people in the United States to study all of the successful people and find out what their common traits were. And his findings were, I think, fascinating. But one of the key things that he talks about, one of the common threads to all of the most successful people throughout history, is their attitude was good. And he said this about positive mental attitude: you must have a positive mental attitude to make life pay off on your own terms. Nothing great has ever been achieved without one. Recognize that your mental attitude is the only thing over which you have complete control. Exercise that control and direct it by using your positive mental attitude. Realize and prove to your own satisfaction by making it so that every adversity, sorrow, or defeat, whether or not you caused it to happen, contains a seed of equivalent benefit which you can nurture into a blessing that soars above the disaster that brought it. Learn to close the door of your mind on all failures of your past. Clear your mind of any influence which does not support a positive mental attitude. Find out what you want most in life and go after it. So that's not a disingenuous, fake positive attitude there, where something happens and you just look the other way, bury your head in the sand and pretend that something bad or challenging didn't happen. Instead, it is problem solving. It's recognizing that things that happen can, if you believe as I do that everything happens for a reason, then you just kind of go with the flow. And something comes about that's a little more challenging, it's dealt with, you learn from it, and you move forward. Using the headlight example from earlier, there's no sense in wondering about the 200 feet behind you any more than what lies beyond the 200 feet in front of you. The past is a seminar you've already taken, the future is not yet set, so learn from what's already happened and apply it so that your future is better. Now, for those of you that need more science, there's a very cool experiment. You can look it up online. It's called the rice experiment. But it was initially conducted by a Japanese scientist who placed 2 jars of cooked rice in a controlled environment. And he labeled one jar, "I love you," and on the second, "I hate you." And each day, he would walk up to the jars, and to the one that said, "I love you," he would look at it, and with as much positive emotion as he could muster up, he would look at it and he would say, "I love you." And on the other jar, the one that said, "I hate you," he would look at it and he would muster up as much ferocity as he could, and he would look at it and say, "I hate you." Each day he did that for several days, for several weeks. The "I love you" jar went unfazed over that time period. The "I hate you" jar, it turned moldy and rotten. It underscores something that I say in my office all the time, which is that if you think good things, you're going to get good things. If you think about how you're going to get well, you're more likely to get well faster. If you think bad things, conversely, you're going to get bad things. Have you ever met anybody who constantly talked about how they never had any money, who actually one day ends up with a bunch of money? Very rare, isn't it? Those people that are constantly going after what they want instead of concentrating on what they don't want, life tends to work out a little bit better for them. Which brings us to the how-to guide. Now, I'm going to preface the how-to guide by saying the following. Some people are just naturally positive, and for those of you that are more like me and sort of grew up in an environment where we concentrate on the negative and we try to find the worst case scenario and explore that option so we're prepared for it, which, believe it or not, actually inherently makes it more likely that the worst case scenario happens. If you grew up in an environment like that or similar to it, you may actually think that these genuinely naturally positive people aren't out there. These people that negative things are said to them, done to them, etc., and then they wake up the next day and they don't care. I mean, those people actually do exist. I married one, and it took me the better part of the first decade that I knew her to accept the fact that she wasn't just putting it on, that wasn't just a fake positivity, that literally was just the way she was, which to this day is amazing to me. I have to work so hard at it myself, and she, on the other hand, it just comes naturally to her. So for those of you that it comes naturally to, it's just a matter of figuring out how to enhance it. And quite frankly, attitude may not be a big part of the health of your health that you need to work on. But for those of you that are more like me, or that are even worse than I was, then your journey to mastering your attitude and really getting to a better, healthier place with your stress management skills begins with your understanding that this is going to be a process best taken one day at a time. The best thing about the future is that it comes one day at a time. Abraham Lincoln said that. Another good quote for you from Bob Proctor, who is heavily featured in the film The Secret, which is all about positive mental attitude, is that anyone that ever accomplished anything did not know how they were going to do it, and this is the part I want you to remember. They only knew that they were going to do it. I also want you to remember, especially for those of you that are skeptical about this part of the health equation and how important it is, I want you to remember that stress, what it does to you physiologically, if you've ever heard of the fight or flight response, I want you to imagine for a moment that you walk outside your house this morning and you see a bear. And imagine how you would feel. Really get into that mode and picture what it would be like if you walked outside today and you saw a bear. Your heart rate is going to skyrocket. Your lung capacity is going to expand tremendously because your body's getting ready to take off and run or put up the dukes, and this is not the suggestion I would make, but fight the bear, the fight or flight. Your digestive system, conversely, in that scenario, it's not really all that needed at the moment, so your digestive function is going to plummet. Your immune system is not that important in that moment, so your immune system is going to decrease its activity. Think of it like a dimmer switch. All of the systems that are needed for immediate physical response, they're going to get turned way up, and all the ones that aren't, they're going to get turned way down. So those bad days that you have at the office, those arguments that you have with your spouse or your kids, that negativity that you hear on the TV that you have such strong emotional response to, that fight or flight response kicks in all the same. Maybe not to as great a degree, but make no mistake. Sure, Christopher Reeve falls off a horse, breaks his neck, and he almost dies. That's a humongous physical trauma. You don't have that. But you have other physical traumas that have similar reactions just over a longer period of time. The effects come on more gradually. Same thing with the bear example. You're not going to encounter a bear, and your reaction is not going to be the same if you encountered a bear as it would be if you were to have a couple of bad days and a few bad arguments, but it's still going to cause your body in those lesser situations to kick into the fight or flight response. And that's why stress has such a negative physiologic reaction. And that's why breaking that pattern is so important from a physical standpoint. So how do we release stress from the body? One of the easiest ways is breathing. Seems very simple. Most people breathe only adequately. They don't breathe optimally. When we are in a stressful situation, our muscles get really tight, oftentimes because we stop breathing. It's a strange subconscious choice that we make, because in actuality, fight or flight responses allow our lung capacity to expand. But our physical response is often to kind of clam up, curl into the fetal position. So our muscles become very tight, and we carry a lot of that strain in our muscles, especially of our neck and our shoulders. That's typically the most common area where stress is carried physically. So that stress has to be released. The emotional buildup, obviously, can wreak havoc as well. So the nice thing about breathing is that it releases the tension from the muscles, but it also helps you flush it out of your brain. It helps you emotionally process. It helps ground you. So one simple thing that you can do, either when you encounter a stressful situation or after the fact, is do the following breathing exercise. Take a very deep breath in for 5 seconds. Hold that breath in for 8 seconds. And let it out for 5 seconds. 5, 8, 5. If you want to take it to the next level, you can do it multiple times. If you want to take it to the level beyond that, then while you are breathing in, be thinking of the root emotion behind why a situation stresses you out. Is the argument that you have with your wife triggering a deep-rooted fear? If so, identify fear when you're taking that deep breath in, and on the way out, when you're breathing out, let it go. This is a great thing to do while you're praying. When you pray, you're always asking for what you want. You're asking for help. You're asking for assistance. Well, incorporate also flushing out what you don't want, as well as taking in what you do. This is also a good method to help segue into a daily exercise of attracting what you want. A lot of times people will wake up and the first thing that they will think of is all of the stuff that they have to do that day, or all of the junk that they never cleared out the previous day. If you clear it out, it may not be there when you wake up in the morning. But it's a good exercise to get into the habit of doing. If every day waking up and taking a few deep breaths and kind of gearing yourself mentally while you do so toward what you really want to accomplish that day. Or even better, being gracious for what you already have. Starting your day out by being thankful for your wife and your kids, for having a job that you like, for having the car that you always wanted, for the movie that's coming out that weekend that you can't wait to see. Get into a pattern of immediately, as soon as you wake up, starting your day out geared toward what you do want, not toward what you don't want. And it sets you up in a pattern and in a rhythm for the rest of the day that continues with that theme. At the end of the day, do the same thing. Deep breaths, letting go of what you don't want, bringing in what you do. Meditation and prayer are really good for this because they get you geared toward focusing on the things that you desire and away from concentrating all that attention on what's wrong. Instead, focusing on what's right. Now, exercise is a good way to release stress. For some better than others, though. This is highly individualized. Some people can go for a run, and it will release a lot of the physical stress. It will allow them to eliminate a lot of the stress that's built up because it gets them loose, it gets them focused on something else. But it doesn't always necessarily eliminate the emotional part. That's why an exercise like yoga is very, very positive because it allows you to clear away both the physical stress that builds up from challenging days and challenging weeks, months, years, etc., as well as allows you to get into the breathing patterns that we talked about, which are very constructive in releasing stress emotionally. There's a lot of different types of yoga. I do a type of yoga for inflexible ex-athletes called DDP yoga. It's a home DVD set. I like it quite a bit. Other people, they prefer to go to a class. Some people prefer hot yoga for 90 minutes. Others prefer 15 minutes on DVD at home. Either one is fine, but it's a very constructive exercise. So to wrap this thing up for today, what I want you to consider doing, whether you're innately capable of dealing with stress really well, or if you're the type that needs to consistently work on it, I want to challenge you to do the following. I want you to substitute 3 positive thoughts for every consistently negative thought that you have. For every thought that you have about lack, I want you to replace it with 3 thoughts about gratitude. And do that for 1 week. At the end of that week, I want you to just take note of how your life has been by doing that. So I thank you for joining me today on this inaugural episode of the Atlas for Wellness podcast. I hope that you took something away from it. If you have any questions or if you would like to discuss the topic any further with me, then you can email me at uppercervicalhealthcare@gmail.com. If you wish to share this podcast, I feel free to do it. I certainly would love it to become a resource for people looking and seeking ways to become healthier. Everybody be well, and I'll be thinking good things for you until the next episode.